Matthew Stepanic.
And I'm Rayanne Haines.
And this is Let's Get Lit. In every episode, we interview poets of stature about their work and about the power and relevancy of poetry in order to support it and promote poetry, the arts, and literacy. In a conversational style, we'll enjoy a glass of wine, chosen to match the poet's personality and style, while learning more about each poet and asking why poetry matters to them. Hopefully we'll be able to maintain our composure as we move closer to some form of bacchanal truth. We would like to acknowledge our interview takes place on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional gathering place for diverse Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Pappas Chase, Nakota Sioux, and many others whose histories, languages, and cultures continue to influence our vibrant communities.
We'd like to thank wine expert Gurvinder Bhatia for his generosity as the podcast wine sponsor. Our pairings come from Gurvinder's private cellar.
Let's Get Lit is presented with the Writers Guild of Alberta, and we're grateful for their support in promoting and sharing this podcast. As you're listening, feel free to share your thoughts on the conversation with us on Twitter at @lets_lit. Today, we're joined by Pierrette Requier, Edmonton's 6th Poet Laureate, who was a child of Les Grandes Prairies Canadiennes, a bilingual poet, playwright, performer, producer, and mentor. Although her work constantly brings her to new places, her pieces come from some deep core of home in her, a rising up of words, a rhythm through the ears like a heartbeat, a surging like the August wind in the leaves. Wherever she finds herself, she plants her feet in the sustaining earth and absorbs. As a writer/performer collaborator, her deepest interest is in sharing the delight of la langue vivante, language in motion, language that is constantly evolving, thus lends itself to new artistic creations. Pierrette believes that poetry is an inexhaustible resource and loves to share this wealth, and we're very grateful to have her sharing it with us today. Welcome, Pierrette.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, well, we're delighted that you're here. I get to talk to you about your wine this evening because, as you know, with our podcast, we always match a poet with a wine. And our wine for this evening, which you've already had a sip of, is a Bartier Bros Merlot from the Requier vineyard from 2014. And winemaker Michael Bartier likes to wax lyrically about the Requier vineyard. The vineyard has a dense loam topsoil above gravel with limestone-covered granite, quartz, and basalt. And Michael says that irrigation and groundwater accept minerals from these rocks and in turn deliver them to the vines, causing a profound effect on the grapes. The vines are aged between 9 and 11 years, and the result is a Merlot that's treading the stony, silky line with a pure, fresh, savory, black cherry, salty, fruity flavor while assimilating the oak. And I think we were kind of talking about that when we tasted it. But what he says is it's impressive and steak-worthy.
Well.
And so we should have. And so for you tonight, I truly believe that you also balance the lines between stony and silky. And that is to say that your work balances different languages, different cultures and times in your life, and different ways of looking at the world. And I think that you are that unique poet who embraces home and language while also looking outward and forward and asking us to do the same. And so I thought that this fits very well with who you are as a poet and what you do in the community as a poet. And so we're honored to welcome you here this evening and to enjoy this wine with you.
Well, I'm certainly honored to be here this evening, and what an introduction. I love this wine thing for many reasons. It seems to bring so many words out of people, so many poetic words, and thank you for that introduction. You read my poetic bio very well.
Thank you. I prepared it just, a couple of times in the mirror.
Oh,
Didn't
did
want
you?
to sit across from you and not read it poorly. Also, I think I was inspired by the Merlot. I had a couple sips of it, and I was just imbibing Pierrette's, your spirit.
It's a wonderful idea, and of course, when you say inviting my spirit, I mean this is spirit. Wine is spirit, and just the idea of the loam and the stones and everything you said just was wow. What a wonderful writer you are, Rayanne.
Oh gosh. Well, thanks.
I found it interesting that like the winemaker says that it's like steak worthy.
Yeah.
But, like I was finally like thinking like I enjoyed this because I was like, oh, this feels like a Merlot that I can just drink by itself. Like normally like Merlot seems too bold and overpowering, but this one's good and like salty.
Yeah,
It's a weird
salty.
word,
He used
but,
the
like,
word salty.
I love that.
Yeah.
I sensed something when I drank it. I thought it's the first time there's something about it, the way it hits the tongue.
Yeah, and when I was reading up on the wine, and he was talking about how he said that it's almost like the vines are feeding off the rocks to kind of pull from the salt from the rocks into the wine. And I thought, well, that's a really unique way of looking at it. So I liked his way of looking at how things are created, and it reminded me of how you look at things, in different ways, and like kind of that place of being in this place and on this land, and how that feeds into your creative process from what I know of you. So
my name is Pierrette, and Pierre in French is rock.
Oh.
And a Pierrette is a little stone.
wow,
This is ooh.
I'm good.
You knew it, or like there was a
We are
ghost?
connected.
We are.
Something touched you to pick that bottle.
Wow. Yeah, I think
Cool.
so. Cool.
Cool. Language, fun with language on Let's Get Lit.
Yes,
Language
and wine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. Well, let's talk to you, Pierrette, about other things. How are you tonight?
Tonight I'm excellent. I just had a 10th interview with a person who's involved in this playwriting I'm doing for the city of Grande Prairie because of it's the 50th anniversary of the official language laws in Canada, and Grande Prairie is officially a bilingual city because people from the ACFA, the Francophone organization, one of the Francophone organizations of Alberta, has done a really, really good job of meeting the community. Bridge building, like I did a little bit when I was Poet Laureate.
Right.
You go to the Anglophone state, look what we've got to offer. How can we help? How can we be on board with you about everything in a community? So I interviewed the last person, and he was really interesting because he had a completely different point of view. He's Anglophone,
Yeah.
and his father was in the military, and he ended up being in Germany in kindergarten, and he had to take French because he studied another language.
Right.
And so that was an exciting day, and somehow as I was working with him, I could feel the 9 other interviews that I did with people who come from different areas in the world and who speak different kinds of French, and that's all in that little city of Grande Prairie. So it was a good day.
Yeah.
So I'm very fine tonight.
Okay, good. And how did that come about, doing these interviews and getting involved with that?
Well, a play was commissioned because one of the directors of the CFA in Grande Prairie loves theater, and he had seen my play that was done in 2015 and thought I was maybe the best person to write a play about with a theme of languages and what's it like to live a minority in Alberta. And he wanted me to write the play and then to interview people so that at the end there would be a part where they would show different facets of what it means to be Francophone. It means a lot of things. So I titled the play, Where Do You Come From? Because in Alberta we all come from somewhere else. And,
Yes, we do.
in French, c'est d'où on vient. And it's kind of in French there's a little bit of a different connotation. D'où on vient? Where do we come from? And then of course anybody who has an accent is asked that all the time. Where do you come from? And it's not a pleasant thing.
Yeah.
But it's a bit of I used it as a bit of humor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah.
When do you know like when it'll be staged?
The play will be staged in May.
Oh, in
at
May.
some
Oh,
point
okay.
in May.
Oh, so soon.
They haven't to date yet. I've been working on it October, November, December, January until today. So it was a fast write in a way, but I did free up a lot of time to do it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And is poetry a part of the play?
Absolutely, poetry is a part of the play, and there are quite a few bilingual pieces of poetry in there, because a lot of the people of Grand Prairie are going to come. Some of the spouses of the francophones are unilingual. Some of their children might be unilingual. So I always kind of aim to work with both languages, just to say they're both there all the time.
Right.
And they need not be alienated from one another. We don't have to stay in our little francophone silos or something like that. We need to just praise it and show it off, and also invite people who speak other languages other than French or English in this province, and say, love to hear you speaking Polish. Great.
Right.
Yeah. So we have all this language wealth in Alberta because so many people come from elsewhere.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh well, that's really a great project. Do you think it'll come out of Grand Prairie, or it's just going to be there? Like it's not going to tour, or?
I'm not sure. I reserve the rights to the play, and so depending on what happens there, I'm open to it going on the road or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not far
Very
for
cool.
a road trip from Edmonton.
No, it's not far.
I'll let people know.
Yeah. Thank you.
Are you reading anything interesting right now?
Yes, I am reading an anthology of
you brought it.
I wrote an anthology. I'm reading Staying Alive, Real Poets for Unreal Times, because we're living in unreal times politically.
Yes, we are.
And poetry is very, very healing to me, meaning making whole when I feel that the world might just, the political stuff might just crack us up. I just go to poetry, and it was, this book was published in 2002 in England, edited by Neil Astley, and it got eaten up like hotcakes, and then they re-edited it, and they did it for America, and then he actually inserted quite a few American poets in the book. It's just a wonderful read, and I have a friend, Anne Gerard Marshall.
Oh yes, yes.
Cox. And occasionally when I read a naughty one or a really great one, to cheer her up, I'll go, Anne, have I got a poem for you? So it's my way of really staying healthily alive.
Yeah.
And so it's a huge book. But
it is huge. We're looking at it right now. It's large.
I've gone through some sometimes a whole section. Or if I get really, really anxious about stuff, I'll say, okay, you sit down now and you read 10 poems. That's your goal.
So you say that to yourself?
I say that to myself, and it redirects my anxiety into creative. So I call it riding the wave of anxiety, or riding the wave of nervousness. It can sharpen you.
Yeah.
Then I can write.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking it also might help you feel good if you beat a politician with it. Like it just looks
it's heavy enough.
Yeah. I've not thought of that. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean that's just like one of the things that I first think of when I see a large book that seems really thick. Are you thinking of maybe doing an Alberta one? Since you're the expert on it, like reading both editions, you should reach out and see, bring in some Alberta and Canadian poets and for our divisive times.
Well, that's a project. I'll consider that. Thank you for that too.
Yeah, I mean, I might have some things to say about Jason Kenney if you need something for the future.
Okay. Okay.
Or you just need someone to hold.
Get those poems written, and then I'll do the anthology.
Oh, okay. We have it on record.
Yeah, that's what's there.
Yes.
And if you beat someone with the book, I can be your alibi.
Okay.
As well.
Okay.
That's my two offerings.
Okay.
So the other thing about reading for me is that I made a vow to myself at one point when I realized that my French was really not up to par. I made a vow to give it 5 years that I would read and listen to music and do French more than 50% of the time. I really committed, and I've kept doing it. So I am reading works written by Hubert Reeves, who is an astrophysicist. He was raised in Quebec, brilliant little boy, and became an astrophysicist, and he's won a lot of prizes for his work.
Wow.
And so, of course, he writes in French. But he was interviewed by Mary Haines from Ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And,
the Ideas program.
he has a way of speaking about the history of the evolution of the universe, like the Big Bang Theory until now, and who we are as human beings in that context. And the last book that he got published with a number of other very intelligent people concerned about the environment is called La Terre vue du cœur, The Earth as Seen from the Heart.
Oh.
It's a book of awesome, as you'll see, awesome photographs.
It's beautiful.
Essays by, here he is.
Oh, okay.
So for our listeners, he's a very stately but furry-faced
Yeah.
man who is. He looks very kind.
He's very kind, and his concern right now is with the environment, and he explains his concerns by telling the story of the evolution of the universe, from complexity to etc. etc. It's hard stuff to read, but it's wonderful, and how he's gathered. He now lives in France. And his whole acreage is a study and a gathering center for people who have a lot of impressive ideas about the environment and what to do with regards to children, with regards to the earth.
Yeah.
And also they bring hope because they believe that you've got to do something, and he says that politics is not going to do a whole heck of a lot for it.
No, I agree.
And he doesn't rant about it. No time to rant. He's 86, and he's just happy to transmit what he knows, and he does it really well. He said that in every city, and in so many cities, people are doing things, and to keep doing little things and to keep acting as if there is something you can do.
Yeah.
And these are concepts that I learned in basic psychology when I was young.
Right.
So, and he's often asked about religion, and he's a pure scientist, and he said, science tells you how it works. Science does not talk values, but he said human beings need some place where they can extract values, and so there's no fight. He doesn't blast religion and say it's all fairy tales and look how ridiculous it is. The other thing that he really adores is music, classical music. So when Mary Haines interviews him on Ideas, they speak, and then there's a little musical interlude, and they speak, and he speaks English with a heavy French accent, but also very understandable. So he's who I'm reading right now. I'd read him years ago, and I found this little book on my shelf, and one day of depression and fear about what's going on in the world, I read that, and I went, oh, Pierrette, you have to not stay little-minded and stuck on what politicians are doing. You don't even believe in them that much.
Right.
And so, get reading, and I found this book at Carrefour, our only French bookstore in Edmonton, and it got me reading and thinking about him. So that's what I'm reading.
Wonderful. I think you're the only guest we've ever had who has brought her books in with her to show us. So, way to go.
I love books.
Yeah.
I love to see them.
I'd love to see them too. I'd love to see them and touch them and have the visual.
He's got a series of little books like this, and they're beautiful.
And they're in French, correct?
They're in French, but a lot, because he's so famous, a lot of his books are translated.
They're translated.
Into English. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Excellent.
So on that note of talking of kind of like the healing power of poetry and reminding yourself not to remain little, why don't you share with us one of your poems, Pierrette? Particularly, we'd love to hear Ghost from you now.
Okay.
And Ghost comes from Pierrette's book, Details from the Edge of the Village.
I want to say that the cover of the book is one of Ian Sheldon's paintings. It's a huge painting. And when Frontenac said that they would publish the book, I went to one of his shows. He's considered Alberta's storm chaser.
Oh.
Yeah. He now lives in Jasper, and I went to his show, and I told him I waited, till people stopped talking to him, and I said, I'm having a book published, and would you like to be on the cover of my book, because I like your paintings, and I want this one on the cover of my book. How would that work? And he said, well, tell me more. So I did.
Right.
And I told Frontenac House that I thought I'd found a cover, because he told me that I had an essay on the cover.
Yes.
Which was lovely.
Yes.
And I connected, and 2 days later it was all arranged.
Wonderful.
Wow.
So ghosts goes something like this. Ghosts. When my throat was scratchy and my head throbbed and my nose burned from dry cold, when I didn't want to get out of bed, the ghosts of my settler ancestors came for me, lost adrift, a wailing, rattling old dry bones. And I get that they want me to speak for them, and my first thought is, there's nothing to say. There are no words, for there are less than modest beginnings, for the morsels of story that fell through the cracks, for the crumbs of anecdotes that left a sketchy path. What is the word for their beginning again and again, for an unsettling settling we have been taught to forget? And I sit in la prairie en pu finir, where they sweated and toiled. I fumble in my head, I poke, and I find bleak and sparse, and see slough and creek, and a row of skimpy trees as I spit out mouthfuls of mosquitoes, see their cattle die of swamp fever, and one of their 2 horses step on its own tongue while grazing, and pull it right out, as I see 2 sets of great-grandparents die in their shacks.
I find the visuals in that poem so strong, right? The idea of the horse stepping on his tongue and pulling it out. And it was so unexpected because when I was reading that poem, I thought, oh, there's these lines about the cracks in our foundation and the, learning to unlearn, and then all of a sudden there was the horse stepping on his tongue. And yeah, it was really, I found it almost like you were pulling us into something different. But then once you read that, you were able to look back at perhaps what you had already read and see it from a different context. So it was one of my favorite poems in your collection.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
I read it at Verse Fest in Ottawa in November, and a woman had read from her lovely poetry, and she had a ghost poem, and it was so nice because I read right after her, and she had one of these lines where I could segue right into this one. And it is often a favorite poem of a lot of people. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's so strong.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So in your book, the details from the edge of the village, in the front description, it states that this book is about growing up with what one is given, what one is born into, the complexity and mystery of coming to age, the dance between delight and disappointment, terror and awe, right and wrong as one emerges into personhood. So you are a woman who has a lifetime, I feel like, of emerging at your back. So from poet to playwright, performer to producer. And how do you feel that emerging informs your writing today? Or that idea of emerging?
I think that one of the things that formed me, that had a good formation for me, was to be an elementary school teacher of French immersion, because I had to consider language differently to reach the children. And I've always done a lot of poetry with children. I just thought everybody did it. And at one point I realized, well, no, not everybody does this. It's because I've been a poet for a long, long time, even before I wrote.
Right,
even before I knew letters,
Yes.
I know where this impulse came. In French, c'est la pulsation. It's a very beautiful word. It's like where does that pulse come from? And I know where it comes from. And so always there's emergence. And, when you teach French immersion, you have a lot of fear at the beginning. I started in grade 2, and so they had learned to read in French, and then they learned to read in English, but their French just went... And it was so awesome to see the emergence of these little children. And so I feel I learned a lot through teaching children and really literally seeing their minds tick. By the end of January, you go, wow, I mean, these are really smart persons.
Kids are underrated often, right?
Oh my gosh, totally.
Yeah.
So somehow it kept me connected to the emergence of learning, of curiosity, and I adored teaching.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then when it kind of dried up on me, it was really a horrible couple of years because letting it go and resigning was like a divorce in a way. It had that kind of a grief to it, and yet I started studying and I found my own mind again, and it became not all about the children and not all about the staff and not all about contributing and not all about sitting on committees,
Right.
And then I really started to emerge into my own as a writer when I freed myself up to have a private practice and work one-on-one, and I knew I needed to work with adults and no longer with children.
Yeah.
And so that was another form of emergence. Studying gave me back my mind, and my first course at St. Stephen's College was feminist theology. I have no idea what that beast would look like.
Oh, jeez.
And it was such a breakthrough. One of the first things we did is we watched 3 videos on the burning times, the witch burning times, and how women disappeared, and it just opened up a whole area of wanting to know how women felt. And as I watched the videos, I could feel in my bones that whole phenomena and why we're so goddamn scared so much of the time as women.
Yes.
We can always get attacked, we can always get nixed, we can always, and because as I had developed professionalism and I thought, no, you're not going to. And so the poetry urge at that point was very, very strong, and I just got into it, joined the Stroller Poets Society, joined the Writers Guild of Alberta, joined everything I could, and went into it and developed a practice and was really serious about it. Even if I was mothering, mentoring 3 stepchildren at the time, I still did that. I still wrote my master's thesis.
Yeah.
And writing my master's thesis, there are those days when you're writing a big project and it's going well, and I just thought, oh my God, I would really, really like everybody in the world that I love to be able to have this feeling of loving writing like I do right now in this moment. And somehow a couple of weeks later, I just had this idea to start writing seminars, and I did it for 17 years.
And that's the Wind-Eye seminars,
the Wind-Eye
right?
writing seminars, yeah. So part of my writing life has been to transmit this love, to make space for this love, and the seminars were all women.
Oh, I love that.
It ended up being like that, and guys would say, "Well, how come you don't have men in your seminars?" I said, "Well, they've been invited, they don't come."
Wow.
No, they didn't. It happened that way, and we didn't force it.
Right.
But one of the things I did in the seminars also is that I would invite guest readers, especially people who were just going to get a book launch. They had been told they would be published, and it takes a while to publish.
Yes.
And so I would invite them to come and read to us as a practice run, as a way to begin to put their stuff out there. So yeah. So that's another form of emergence.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I said, I tried. I once I got into it, I brought everything I knew into it.
Right. So it almost feels like you kind of emerge on like what you're feeling in that moment in time, and just allow yourself to try new things and experiment. Yeah.
Well, when I was a teacher, I was asked to do resource room in French, and there were no resources, so I had to create them. I had to go buy books, speak to consultants.
Right.
So basically, nobody could tell me what to do, but I had to do a good job.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I was teaching at Greenfield School in Edmonton for 12 or 13 years, and these parents were really behind you as a French immersion teacher, and their kids had to excel.
Oh.
They expected, no less than at least a master's for each of their children.
Right.
So even if they were in grade 2, you had to perform. And so I started putting things together, and it worked.
Yeah.
It worked.
Yeah.
And so I think that was also my training. And so it made me able to have a kind of a gutsiness, and a little. It has to do with really loving what you're doing.
Yeah, I think so.
With at some point in your life you quit something, and
Right.
there's a breakup.
Yeah.
But then when somehow when I hit upon something that calls me, I follow the calling. That's what I call it.
Yeah.
I follow the calling.
Okay. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to an even earlier emergence, you were born and raised a Franco-Albertan in the Peace River region of northern Alberta, and throughout all of that time you remained committed to operating as an artist with 2 official languages.
Right.
Can you talk to us a little bit about your relationship to language and how that feeds your artistry and poetry?
Yes, I can talk about it.
Yeah. Good that you answered the question. Next question.
I was, at first when I started writing, I would write in English, and then I would try to write equally in French, and really proper, correct French. And when I wrote in English, I had French words sneaking in there all the time. And there was a sense of, I speak English with a French accent, and when I make a mistake in English, they say, oh, it must be the French, and my French is not really the best French in the world. It's Northern Alberta French, and it's a dialect. And I was in a class with Eunice Scarf at the Women's Writing Week at the Faculty of Extension, and she read to us from Sandra Cisneros' book, The House on Mango Street. It's a book written in short little vignettes of a life, and they're very poetic, and she writes English with a Spanish accent.
She writes it that way.
She writes it that way.
Interesting.
And Eunice read us 5 of the vignettes. And all of a sudden, ta-da! I thought, oh my God, I don't have to separate my language. I don't have to write that boring French poetry that I write. It's awful. I will use both as much as I want all the time. So Eunice said, okay, all of these little vignettes sort of come out of a very strong emotional something in Cisneros' life. So right now I want you to make a list of 20 very emotional situations from, since you can remember until today.
Yeah.
Make a list. And before you leave today, you must write 2 vignettes. And that never stopped. I wrote 2, and after that I would get up in the morning and write, and that's the book. That's the book.
That's the book. That's how The Edge of the Village came to be.
That's right.
Oh, how interesting.
And that day I was sitting there and I had almost not gone to class because I was so bloody busy, and I just thought, I have too many details on my plate. And somehow, soon after, the title of the book was Details from the Edge of the Village.
Yeah.
Because we lived on the edge of a very small village. I mean, my neighbor was a wheat field.
Right.
flat. Yeah.
It's a beautiful, I love the title. I think it's a great title. Yeah. And it says so much.
The people at Frontenac kept the title too. So again, it's one of those things that happened, and whenever that thing zings me, I follow it.
Yeah.
I move with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I still get up at 5 in the morning, and that's how the book was written, at 5 in the morning. And I'd get up, and I would literally take a steno pad, write, and then run to there was a little office on top of the old garage, and I'd go write them in there. And we had 3 kids living with kids living with us. But it's this drivenness. I'm 4th of 11, so I was, I worked in the middle of a huge industry. We made life happen. We made food happen. We made ironing happen. And so you know how to carry a whole bunch of things and bounce things in the air, and then.
Yeah. Fourth child of 11 children?
Yeah.
Wow.
7 brothers.
Ooh.
Oh.
That was good training to be an elementary school teacher.
I bet it was.
No little boy got the better of me.
I bet.
For some reason, my math just wants it to be like 4 girls and then immediately 7 boys. But I imagine it would have been a little bit
1
more.
boy, 3 girls, 5 boys, 1 girl, 1 boy.
Okay.
Huh. I don't know how you predict that.
I don't know.
You don't predict that. You just be a French Catholic.
Yeah. Just keep them coming. So you're also going to be a part of She the River, which is Rayanne's braided poetry event that she's producing, and it takes place in Edmonton on March 19th. I don't know if Rand's going to give us any details
Well, I
on
think-
it outside of that.
Yeah.
Or that's kind of, that sort of describes it. There's going to be 10...
Right.
10
yeah. So She the River is it's a braided, multicultural, multi-generational, and multilingual event. We have 9 female poets that are a part of the production, and it's going to take place at the Royal Alberta Museum at 7 p.m. on March 19th, and Pierrette is one of the poets that's going to be a part of the event. But the idea is to showcase the stories of all these women's journeys on stage, and then to see how we intersect together, where we intersect together, where we meet on our journeys as women and where we don't, and to just be in that space together of sharing stories as women, to take joy in kind of how we connect as human and as humans and as women. And so Pierrette is going to be a big part of that event, and then
I'm very excited for it. Can you share the poem you'll be presenting at the event? And
Yes.
maybe before you read it, can you talk to us a little bit about why you chose the poem? Because I'm guessing Rayanne gave you free reign. She didn't try to control it.
No.
Wow. That's a lot of trust.
Well, this
lot of
poem
trust.
is called Parting in 3 Parts. My only son lives in Montreal. He's been gone for quite a few years. He loves it there, and it's a long-distance relationship with my son and my 10-year-old granddaughter. And even though I had 7 brothers, having a son was a huge stretch because I am a woman, I am female, and there's a lot of guesswork, and it's tricky to be a mom in many ways. And I've always tried to be a good mom and to make sure not to impose too much feminine on him, and yet he's a very highly sensitive person, and has had anxiety and stuff like that. We've worked with that. I'm glad I had training in psychology, and when I go visit him, it's very intense because I'm there for a week or 10 days.
Yeah.
And so one of the Christmases I went to his place, and it had been a really good visit, and he gets a little owly before I leave.
Oh, because he's going to miss you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And it can show in different ways. But anyways, okay, so I get to Montreal, it's +16, it's Christmas time. But the day before I am to leave, there's a huge storm. So that night he goes out and shovels, and he's really happy about the shoveling. He's going to get the car out, he's going to put it on the street because he's driving mom to the airport tomorrow morning. And that night we're all a little strange because we're detaching again.
Right.
And, well, it had rained before it had snowed. Therefore, as much as shoveling as he did, he tried to get out, and it was zing, zing.
Yeah, just...
And he came in, and he was furious. I don't mind shoveling, but I fucking hate being stuck. And I looked at him, and I thought, oh, he's going into distress. Even though your child is like 40 years old, you feel that he's going into distress. And his girlfriend and I thought, we're going outside, we're going to go help. And this is kind of how it came, and I just felt that night as if somehow I was helping him out of the distress of his very, very horrible birth. He nearly died at birth. And then I had to have an emergency cesarean. And so when he said, I fucking hate being stuck, I kind of felt psychically that it came from pitting his head against the cervix not opening, and all that.
Wow.
So that's how that came. And it felt as if I was re-assisting at his birth, and this time we opened it up. So that's a big story.
Right.
Okay, so this is where this poem came from, and it started in the airport. It started happening to me in the airport and in the plane. They just all written on a plane.
Oh, you wrote it on the plane.
I wrote it on the plane, came home, polished it, sent it to him. He said, yeah, that sounds about like me.
Gee.
Okay, so he's read it, and
Yeah.
Okay.
He doesn't stick around it very long, but he knows I do these things.
Yes. Okay.
So here it is. So parting in 3 parts. 1, airport. After misreading my boarding pass, ending up deep in the entrails of the airport, in a refugee corner, a half-smiling officer redirects me toward the mass of humanity waiting at my gate, where my heart opens raw and sharp like teeth. 2, on board, à bord. On board the usual bilingual spiel as we taxi toward the last winter task before flight, de-icing. A strange, quiet moment where, in the steady sound of the motor's hum, the hush of green suds spray, I feel the placental tug of detachment, the calm of after-storm. 3, the day after a record snowfall in Montreal, feeling like you could crack. The women figure out how to create traction with cardboard boxes and car mats, so the front wheels of stuck stop digging and digging and digging themselves deeper. The way women hold the calm, shovel on this last perfect and frayed holy night, their every joint locked in place, holding together the brilliant mechanisms of their body. Mine recalibrating to the miraculous approach of a late birthing, not quite as incredulous as old Sarah's of the Bible, yet again the impending break at the frothing brute gate of birth, the great cave of its continuance, the inevitable parting of the waters, each moment of crowning through the wreckage of tearing open, the blood, the gunk, head, shoulders, torso and arms, legs dangling, beings bright burning in the throat, each birth a miracle. Out, women! Get out of the way! Get out of the way, Christ Almighty! L'homme au volant prend son air d'aller, backs up the goddamn black VW, revs up the fucking motor to the max, and let's fly straight out over the snow like the cock's first crow.
Whoa. What an interesting arc and shift.
Yeah, you only get the energy from the reading, or like more so when you read it, the energy of the end.
Oh, like hearing it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
you put your energy into the words. Yeah. I'm excited that's going to be a part of She the River.
Yeah, when I was choosing, I thought, it's going to be that one.
Yeah, it does.
But I remember reading it at the Wine and Women.
Wine and Women.
Yeah, I remember reading it, and a woman came to me after, and she was kind of glassy-eyed, the way people are when a poem moves them.
Yeah.
And she said, I really love what you said about, once a mother, always a mother, and your babies are always your babies. And I mean, I love all my 7 brothers, and I've always been respectful to them and of the masculinity. And I mean, my youngest brother was extremely sensitive, really sensitive. And it's been a trip.
I think it's interesting though, like as you yourself have talked about it, being so, you yourself have been so involved in feminism and, the story of woman and the power of women, and then, but also so respectful of manhood, right? And men's needs and desires. And I really appreciate that lens, because I think sometimes even myself, I forget to have that lens, because I become more focused on my own, needs as a feminist, and with a mother of 2 boys, I sometimes forget about that need to allow the manhood to shape and take place. So I think that poem is really striking and evident of that, right? That how you kind of still allow that lens to be an important part of yourself.
Yeah, it's been a really, really important part of my of my upbringing.
Yeah.
I think of my ethics in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. And I imagine having 7 brothers just shapes some of these things, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a very masculine kind of home, but my mother was also very, very feminine and loved being a woman. And my father really loved her as she was. Oh, they were so different. But yeah, and my mother's soft touch, and I mean, her objective was to make beauty with very little, you know. And she did it. Elle a réussi, I think in French, or she succeeded.
Yeah.
Réussi has a different cachet than succeeded.
Yeah.
Succeeded is more masculine. Yeah. So she'd say, les enfants, accordez-vous, and it means, you know, in this family we can fight, we can swear, but we make up and we love each other.
Right.
And accordez-vous means let's all remain in accord here. We'll have some peace in this house.
Right. Right.
And under that we will have beauty and organization and good food. And now I'll go to bed, sleep, we'll be better in the morning.
The food
Like
sounds
it.
like a bribe.
I like it.
Oh yeah, good cinnamon buns she made.
Oh, I like a good cinnamon bun.
So I guess in line with what you're talking about, like your work really speaks to like the margins. You know, even in spaces where French and English can't exactly talk to each other. And I'm wondering, how do you hope people will engage with these two languages, especially if, you know, their French or their English isn't as good or, you know, comprehensible?
I've gone beyond hope, and I've been very active in offering. In offering how blessed I feel to be bilingual, and how I love that I'm always translating in my head. If I'm reading a great poem in English and there's this line, I go, I wonder what that would be like in French. Or if there's this wonderful French word that I don't understand, I kind of look it up, and then I look up the translation, and I fiddle around with that, and it's like I go about translating all the time. What I've written in French is that my 2 languages speak to one another all the time. So I'm not going to argue about with them. The moment I realized I could play with the 2 languages, it freed me. And that my poetry became really accepted when I did that. And so I try, like I say, I went even beyond hope by offering the idea of having other languages as gift, as absolute delight, as so good for the brain, so good for the heart, so good for everybody. I mean, people in Northern Alberta would say like pea soups or frogs or go home or don't pour your language down my throat. And I thought, well, there are 2 languages here, so you're stupid.
Yeah.
I didn't say that. I don't engage stupidity. It gets nowhere. It could get you a punch in the face too.
But I find that, like with a lot of poets that are writing in 2 languages, or maybe not a lot, some poets that are writing in 2 languages will offer the translation of the other language in their book, and you do not. You ask people to come on the journey with you and to Have you ever considered offering translation, or like what is your thought on that? Do you want people to translate the language, or do you want them to just feel it in the French? Like what is your kind of...
No, both. I want them to hear that French exists all around, and not only French, but a lot of other languages exist all around, and to stop being bothered that they are speaking in their language.
Right.
Well, do you want them not to breathe? That's about...
Jeez.
Asking you not to speak your language is asking you not to breathe, not to be, not to exist as you are. And I also do a lot of translating for people, a lot of it. If they want it, I do a lot of translating. A lot of people have said to me that the most beautiful surprise I had when I started doing half and half, just because I needed to stand up in my bilingualism. And that it was a value for me, and that I was lucky to be bilingual.
Yes, you are.
And to model that, is that people would say, I like when you do that because I realize that catch much more French than I think I know.
Yes.
And a number of people have said, this is being Canadian. We do have it around us. And my purpose is to make it be around us.
Yeah.
Not to shirk or to try to stay in my little French community.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's
But
very
I also
well said.
think
Yeah.
I also think translating can be really good too.
Yeah.
I think both are important.
Okay. So the land, and then particularly Alberta and your relationship, to this place, also seems to play a large part in your body of poetry. And you also wrote and produced the French play Les Blues des
Oubliés.
Les Blues des Oubliés. And in it, you trace the roots of your own bilingual history back in time, and the play has been called an homage to the pioneer francophone woman of Alberta caught between identities and the languages that go with them. How closely does this resemble your experiences as a modern woman or as a modern poet?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. Oh yeah, I still write about that, but I am less and less caught between identities because through writing I have been able to work through the complexity of being francophone in Alberta and to come through by moving into the complexity of it, to come through happy that I am bilingual and to find ways of transmitting that. When I would go into schools, when I was Poet Laureate, I would ask people, how many of you speak a language other than French and English at home?
Yeah.
And I would say, speak it. If you lose your language, you lose part of your soul. There were tears.
Yeah.
And so in struggling with my dual identity,
Right.
I also got to see that basically my bilingualism comes from my paternal grandparents who were raised on the island of Jersey in the English Channel. They were francophone, but they were of the servant class, so they had to learn English. So my grandmother spoke proper English and bon français with a funny accent. A Jersey accent is funny. And, she liked her tea and she did not drink, tea bags because those were just sweepings from the bottom of the bin, you see. So I still drink loose tea. Black loose tea.
Oh, interesting.
Yep.
It is so interesting.
It's to discover your roots, and they are bilingual. And I remember this one radio announcer who interviewed me quite a bit when I was Poet Laureate about French twist and stuff like that. Told me one day, don't say you're bilingual, say you're French. And I had a really, really big, awful reaction inside, and he could see that I thought, no. So he said, well, how do you qualify yourself as a writer? I said, Michel, I am une pure laine bilingue. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool bilingual. And I said, if I pretend that I don't have the other language, I am halved. Je suis moins que moi. Alors, yes, I am bilingual. Yes, my roots are francophone. I'm an Albertan. To live here healthily, you have to speak English.
And it's a part of who you are.
And I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think anybody in the francophone community had ever said that. So I'm a half and half. I am both.
Right.
And there are a lot of us. So I've learned to speak for the lot of us. And all others who speak all other languages.
Right.
Which embarrass or annoy or make people worried. Well, okay, let's stop worrying and maybe see the wealth in it.
Right.
That's a little bit
Yeah.
part of how I live a certain ethical imperative.
Yeah.
There's so much beauty to be lived. Like, why stay small and narrow and
Yes.
bitchy and harmful?
And why constrain it? Why constrain it to only one aspect of the world, right? Or one language of the world? Yeah. Okay.
You kind of brought it up in the previous question, and we also mentioned in your bio, but you were Edmonton's 6th Poet Laureate. And I guess, would you mind sharing with us a little bit about like kind of what you hope to achieve when you kind of like first stepped into the role, and maybe like one of the greatest achievements or things that you took out of it? Maybe those two things align, maybe they don't.
Well, broadly speaking, I got to know my city in a pretty intense, global, and at the same time intimate way. 99.9% of the people were fantastic. I did 200 events in 2 years.
Wow. Wow.
But that includes the radio and the TV and the interviews. I did, and a project that I really, really liked was the mural project that we did. My poem is on a mural in City Center Mall, and it was this poem called This City, Edmonton, Notre Ville Péonna, and then I had written the English version to go pitch it to the people at City Center Mall, and they loved the poem, and then I wrote it in French. And then I was walking in the ravine, and I felt something was missing, and I went to the Music Conservatory and walked all around that area, and all of a sudden I thought, Cree is missing. A First Nations language is missing, and I can't write that. But I thought of Naomi McElwraith, my
she's lovely. She's a lovely
poet
Edmonton
friend.
poet. Yeah.
And I thought, I'm going to ask Naomi to write Cree echoes. I'm going to phone her, I'm going to ask her if she would do that, and she did it. So the poem became trilingual. And so that really was a highlight. It took about a year for that project to evolve. We found the wall, we didn't get the wall, we found the wall, we didn't get the wall, and then we got, a shopping mall. I'm not a shopping mall chick.
Yeah.
But the way they received us, it made me try to think about it made me think about the city in a way that I would not have thought about had I not been invited to do that. Again, the whole idea of, I think one of the best things about being Poet Laureate and so intense about poetry is you're invited to do this, you're invited to do that, you're invited, and every invitation pulls something out of you toward a certain facets of this city. So it was a completely multifaceted kind of existence for 2 years. Intense. But I'd like to read a little bit about, can I read a few lines about this city poem?
Yes.
Sure.
And it touches on your project, Rayanne, of She the River.
Ah. Okay.
And so part of the poem goes like this. I'll do the bilingual thing. I can't do the Cree, which I'm sorry about. But it goes, this city is a song. Its tongue the river. Its first voice the wind. Et le vent souffle, le vent se vante à ciel ouvert, chante son hymne, son psaume. This city is Earth's sonor song of weather, a percussion of thunderheads and lightning, of hail and a drizzle and fog patches. La foudre, les éclairs, la grêle, la bruine, le brouillard. This city sings a long song of winter. Cette ville est rafale verglas, féerie de givre et de frimas. This city hums an incantation of snowfall. Que la neige neige, que la neige neige. Then the shovels course, scrape and lift. Its shifty silt slip off the shovel. Que la neige neige. Ensuite il faut pelleter, déblayer. This city is spring's onomatopoeia of thaw. Les giboulées ensevelissent et Mars fait claquer la porte, se rendort encore, recoule et recoule, les rigolades des rigoles, vers l'équinoxe vernal. Le printemps entonne le cantique des cantiques de la vallée verdoyante. This city is the song of songs of the miraculous greening valley, with its breathing spaces, its whiz of bicycle paths, its sleek runners, and the rumble of skateboarders, its friendly barks on walking trails. Blah, 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 blah. So again,
I don't think it ends like that.
Blah, yeah.
well, again and again and again. So it's this city this city is, this city is, this city is.
Yeah.
And so that was a big, amazing, project. And every encounter, every school, everything I did in bars, every fundraiser, I created a fringe event under a tent. Danielle Cournoyer of Cité Francophone said, I finally got the whole street blocked, and I've got a big tent in the street, and I've got to fill it for 4 nights. Do you think you could fill a night? And I said, how long? And he said, 4 hours. You have 4 hours. And I went, woohoo.
Was I a part of that? Yes, I was.
I'm going to do my multilingual, multicultural thing that night.
Yeah. But, okay, so in your poem, De Belle Noche?
Nos.
Des belles noces.
It means the beautiful wedding.
The beautiful wedding. You expertly blend both your languages, as you know, as we've seen this evening, and you talk about the marriage of two people. But it seemed to me, as I was reading it, that you've created a marriage of your two languages in that poem, right? And so, is that something that you? I mean, you've touched on this, but is it something that you simply feel and do, or are you very conscious about what lines you're creating in French and what lines you're creating in English?
That's a really interesting question. I feel, Rayanne, that it's both. Okay. It's something I feel and do all the time. My brother, I'm the fourth, my brother Jacques is the fifth. And when in our house things would get really tense, we'd start being really, really silly and saying really silly things. Silly rhymes. He had a way of sometimes, talking words backwards.
Oh.
Some gibberish. And so, we felt our way into this, it's almost dissipating of tension. And we did it until people laughed.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were just being silly, playing with words. And we were never forbidden to say any words. We weren't told, non, on parle juste français à la maison. No. We're just speaking French in the house. I understand why people do that. I think it's right for a child to learn. Mom speaks French, dad speaks English. But we never had any of that. The disciplining rules were minimal because there were lots of us.
There was a lot of you. Yeah.
There were basic rules. So yes, I feel it out, but I also can mention that my poetry comes to me auditorily quite a lot, and so something starts playing in my ear, the way Jacques, my brother, and I used to riff off each other and make people laugh. It's a little bit. It's a very funny poem because the couple is un vieux garçon puis une vieille fille, like a bachelor and someone who never thought would marry. How could she be such a beautiful bride? Because she was always échevelée, like her hair was always funny, and she was very intellectual and on many committees, and he was just her little short boyfriend, and he'd sort of pace behind her. They made a nice couple. They were wonderful.
Right.
And when they got married, they were like freaking radiant.
Oh.
Yeah, and so it was an event for everybody in the village.
Yeah.
Like we'd all go to the wedding mass. We weren't invited, but the whole village went because it was mass. So you went to mass, but you got to see the bride.
Oh, you got to see the wedding.
The bride and the groom, yeah.
Oh.
So this is what it's about. It's a bit of a
okay.
Poof.
Okay.
So it goes like this. Des belles noces. La mariée wears a cream-colored bridal gown and fairy-tale shoes. Imagine-toi qu'elle a même recouvert des souliers elle-même pour matcher sa robe. She appliqued flowers from leftover wedding gown fabric, even sheathed the heels with pieces of satin cut from in between the flowers. Oh, thank God it wasn't raining that day. Puis qui aurait cru qu'une vieille fille puis un vieux garçon auraient pu trouver leur match just like that? Tout d'un coup, they found each other. It happened so fast. Et puis qui aurait cru qu'elle aurait fait une si belle mariée, une mariée si éblouissante, et qu'elle était toujours pas mal échevelée, Who would have thought qu'il avait donc l'air heureux, puis que c'était beau à voir, et puis que ça a-tu fait des beaux portraits de noces sur les marches, coming out of l'église du Sacré-Cœur at midday. There they were, the couple, the perfect couple, 2 tiny figurines on top of a 3-tiered wedding cake, the prince and the princess, and à l'occasion de leur mariage, the whole village was there watching in awe.
I love watching you read your stuff because you really become such a part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very great poem, and I do love that mixing of the French and English and just being allowed to be drawn into it. So if we were to ask you what you hope people take away from your work, do you have Do you think about what you hope people take away from your work, or do you leave it open?
Both.
Yeah.
Well, for example, when I created the Wind-Eye writing seminars, what I really wanted people to take away from engaging in poetry was the absolute beauty of language, and it's an inexhaustible resource. I mean, I think of all the writers who will, if you sit down with your journal or at the computer and you're writing, basically you belong to this ancient club of scribes, of writers, of people,
Yeah.
putting down words, and everybody can do it. I mean, my grade 2ers could write poetry in French, and they were Anglophones. So those were miracles that led me to say, it doesn't belong just in the academy. It just, c'est quoi les bons poèmes? What is a good poem? Well, a good poem is one that moves you. And because I'm so auditory, I don't like watching TV much, but I do listen to a lot of radio.
Yeah.
And it's like, people came to the seminars who had never written, who kind of had this inkling that maybe they'd like to, and people started like going to bookstores and buying tons of books, and they've done awesome things.
Yeah.
Because it was sort of an open place where you could come and write, and you could come once a month, and you belonged, and I connected them to the Writers Guild of Alberta, the Poets
Right.
Society Poetry Festival, and so it was another form of transmitting what I love. And when you transmit what you love, you don't fail.
Yeah.
So what I hope for people to take is the fact that they can write poetry, they can understand poetry, they can share in that, in a profound way of being and expressing your being. You express who you are. I mean, as an individual, that's sort of my hope, and it does work. And a thing that informed my poetry a lot is I read a lot of writers on writing as I was doing the seminars, and these people were like total mentors to me, enriched. Yeah. So for me, it's always about enriching.
Okay.
It's about seeing potential.
Right.
I mean, I remember the birth of Jacques, Gilles, Guy, Charles, Michel, Marilyn, Richard. I remember 7 births. And
Of your siblings.
I saw these gorgeous. My mother liked her little babies. We had nice babies, and I saw them. I mean, I saw these brothers grow into pretty amazing grown men, and my sister is awesome.
Yeah.
So it's all related to the writing, and why I think it's important, expressing who you are. I mean, I think of Hubert Reeves, an astrophysicist, who actually goes and does poetry readings with symphony orchestras around the world.
It's
I mean,
amazing.
a die-hard scientific. To me, these kinds of blendings are like miracles.
Yes, they are.
They're miracles,
Yeah.
and any serious poet will understand the scientific mind.
Mm-hmm.
And when I mean serious, I don't mean stuffy. I just mean committed.
Yeah.
Committed. Making space in your life for it.
Mm.
Yeah, so after sharing all of that kind of like personal connection to your poetry, I know that you had been interested in sharing a new poem with us that you had recently just written, so I don't know if you feel like reading that now for us. If you want to introduce it too, or just read it straight.
Well, another thing about poetry is that it is very, very useful in very hard times. If you can withstand going deep down in the ground chakra of you and in the belly and feeling all of the emotions and staying with it, you will probably come up with some pretty awesome poetry that will really, really help others. And I really believe that poetry can save a life. When my mom had Alzheimer's, it was very hard, and I was fortunate to have a lot of siblings, so there was not one person stuck.
Right.
with dealing with it. And so my youngest sister-in-law happened to be a nurse, so she took that over. My oldest sister took over the organization of wherever Mom moved. My mom moved into a lockup unit. It was hell. And the last time I went was very difficult and for me. And after I left the lockup unit, I sat in my car and I wept and wept, and I knew I could not go back to it. I knew that if I went back, if I kept going, I would fall in a deep hole and probably never get out. So it's a decision I made, and I went home and I phoned 5 of my siblings and said, I'm not going anymore. I cannot do it. Which, in a sense, was a good thing to do, because my brothers who had not dared, not dared to go, did realize they had to.
Right.
So sometimes when you push yourself and you see you're on an edge, and you withdraw and make it damn sure that you're withdrawing and that they know, it opens up room for others to say, well, okay, maybe I need to do it. And this is what came out of it. Wearing a dress of roses as big as cabbages, she sang, made up a song for her locked-up mother, whose keen mind had become a scratch of twisted thorns. The mother grabbed and grabbed, bunched fists full of stretchy synthetic fabric, bent, blew hard, and spat into the heart of the roses.
Oh. Yeah, it's really right there.
Yeah, crazy. She was crazy.
Oh, I was expecting like this, longer poem but
It kind
It
of
really
crumbles
got
in
me.
itself, or
Yeah.
you're thinking of just the...
yeah. Oh, that was really, I'm a little speechless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that with us, Pierrette.
You're welcome.
And thank you for everything that you've shared with us this
No,
evening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was an honor to have this place to talk about all of these complex things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been really wonderful. I guess we should also say thanks to Gurvinder Bhatia and the WJ for being amazing partners and supporters of this podcast. And if you're interested in joining us, because I confirmed my attendance, for She the River on March 19th, tickets are available at Ticks on the Square or Glass Bookshop now.
Yeah, and to keep up to date on the podcast, please follow us on Twitter at lets_lit and subscribe and listen to the podcast at audioboom.com and more places where you listen to your favorite podcasts. And yes, we're going to refill our glasses because we have always a symbolic cheers to end the evening.
Would you like more wine?
Always.
Yeah. Splash them in there.
Oh.
Give more to yourself.
He did already.
No,
Okay.
I haven't yet.
No, don't give me.
I'm the one who has to drive. So
That's true. I don't have to drive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, Matthew,
Cheers to this.
Matthew, Rayanne, thank you so much.
thank you, Pierrette.